Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, May 26th, 2021. Today is Sunday, May 23rd, 2021. And for y'all that need the reference, I did have a great week this past week. We went camping 5 days in the woods in East Texas. Saw lots of greenery. Saw lots of pretty scenery. Some nice animals fairly up close. Zeke and I got to meet two different deer fairly close, and got to see a pileated woodpecker twice. That's the ones that are about 2 foot tall, that have a crest, red head and crest on the top, and goes up. Really pretty, striking birds, black and white otherwise, other than the red head. Saw a big mouth bass, about a foot and a half to 2 foot long. Just a magnificent animal. He was in water probably running 9 inches deep. It was over the spillway of the lake. It had been raining, so lots of water running over. And he was just lazily swimming upstream. I noticed him because I'd been watching a school of perch that were eating things coming out of the lake and swimming hard going upstream. And they suddenly scattered. And I thought, most perch don't scatter when you lean over the railing and look at them. They don't care. And then I saw him. And he trailed one, and suddenly he was a foot forward, and I didn't see his mouth open or close, but the fish that he'd been trailing just disappeared. Magnificent animal. And saw a bunch of other animals. Those were the three most impressive sets. So we had a good time. We had met some friends there in the park, and it was their 25th wedding anniversary on Wednesday, when it was my 61st birthday. And so I shared the cake that I cooked in the camp oven with them, and we had sufficient and had a good time with them. And it was a great time was had ball. It rained every day, and it rained every night, but we stayed dry, other than my shoes. I got all 4 pairs of my shoes wet, and other than the house shoes. I kept my house shoes in the tent and never got them outside, so they never got wet. Went through like 12 pair of socks, but other than the feet, everything stayed dry. Zeke and I, of course, were walking in the rain. Your feet are just going to get wet. And we had a good time. I appreciate getting to experience God's nature and enjoying it, and seeing the amazing things God's done. Tonight we're in the book of Joshua, and we're in the 9th chapter, and we're going to find the only time that anybody deceived the Israelites in this whole campaign. And we're going to even talk about why that happened and why it's important. This is not just the people failed to consult God and sinned. And it's presented that this is the only time the whole congregation sinned. But that's not really what's going on, even though that's their understanding of it at the time. It's going to be very important historically. Starting in verse 1. Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, those in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Great Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivitites, and Jebusites, they came together to make war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard that what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. The men put on worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. When they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country to make a treaty with us." The men of Israel said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us, and then can we make a treaty with you?" How then can we make a treaty with you? We are your servants, they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, Who are you, and where do you come from? They answered, Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God, for we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon king of Heshbon, and Og king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth, Our elders and those living in our country said to us, Take provisions for your journey, go and meet them, and say to them, We are your servants, make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is? And these wineskins that we filled are new, but see how cracked they are, and our clothes and sandals were worn out by the very long journey. The men of Israel sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the elders of the assembly ratified it by oath. Now, I understand the Gibeonites. Just like Rahab, they fear for their lives. They know they're fixing to be just destroyed. And they basically lie. They're about 3 days' journey away. They're not on a long journey. They've got actually a small community, small city. It's not very big. All the other kings surrounding them are trying to form an alliance and it's going to be a very fractious alliance. These are city-states that normally war with each other, but they see this big group that's fighting as a unit come in, and they normally have a few hundred or few thousand soldiers in each city, and they fight with each other, and they never ever get ahead, and they never ever form alliances, and they never, and it's a dog-eat-dog world in Canaan, and they see this big group that's going to come in and wipe them out if they fight one by one. And, of course, Joshua is kind of planning on that. Fight one city, destroy it, kill everybody in it. Go to the next city, fight it, kill everybody in it. Go to the next city. And so all these kings are going to unify as a grand army. They've never, ever tried to unite as a grand army. But that's the only way they're going to survive, is hopefully by uniting as a grand army, they can win one SWAT and defeat the Israelites, and then they can go back to their normal squabbling ways. The Gibeonites say, yeah, that's not going to work. They still outnumber you, and you're just going to get defeated all at once, and then they're going to go around and pick off the defenseless cities. Let's do something different. Let's make a treaty with them and lie to them that we're far away, not tell them the critical details, and then, after we get the treaty, then we'll figure out how to make peace with them after we've lied to them. That tells you something about the morality of the Gibeonites. And so they take old bread, they take wineskins that are worn out, about useless. They put on old patched clothes and old patched sandals and say they've been traveling so long that wine was new and new wineskins, the bread was new and new and warm when we left, and our clothes have worn out. Well, the problem, that doesn't add up. The clothes were better than that. I mean, if they left in new clothes and they were wore out, and they left in new sandals and the sandals were wore out, the wineskins would still be decent condition, because wineskins don't wear out in just a few days or few months or few weeks. It takes years of use to wear a wineskin out. Clothes wear out slower than sandals. The sandals might wear out if you went a few thousand miles. Even a few hundred miles. The shoes that I buy from Walmart for walking shoes, most of the experts say, you know, the cheaper shoes, like what I probably get from Walmart, 2 to 300 miles, and you need to replace them. I'm finding, yeah, about every 2 3 months. I'm walking about 100 miles a month. Um, the better quality ones, like I could get from name brand places, they say 500 miles. Um, Problem is they're 5 times as expensive, and I only get 40% longer out of them. I just go buy the cheap shoes and throw them away routinely. It seems kind of wasteful of materials, I agree, but cheaper financially for me, and that's where I'm going with that. I've got to be frugal with my resources. Um, you know, Admittingly, the sandals they made then were probably a little more durable than the plastic shoes that we buy today. Um, but, okay, sandals might wear it in, say, 500 miles, um, like the better name brand shoes. Uh, but clothing isn't going to wear out in 500 miles. Wineskins aren't going to wear out in 500 miles. Bread, uh, 500 miles of walking is 2 months. It's not going to last even 2 months. They're going to have to get provisions along the way to go that far. If the bread was warm when they left the oven, their clothes should still be in good shape. Their sandals might be a little scuffed, but uh, they're going to be fine. The wine will still be decently fresh wine, and the wineskins will still be really good condition. So, you know, the timing of each of the things they're showing off is worn out, doesn't match. Now, admittingly, the Israelites wouldn't have thought of that way because that's not, that's a kind of a forensic, investigative, detective type kind of reasoning that wasn't common in that day. Been somebody really smart to catch on to that. And they had also spent 40 years in the desert with God miraculously protecting their clothes and their sandals because Moses, said, notice your clothes aren't wearing out, your sandals aren't wearing out. And so God had protected them for 40 years. And they knew that God was miraculously protecting them for 40 years. And now they were fixing to go into the land, and that protection of their clothes and their shoes and stuff was going to be done with, and they were going to, start wearing clothes out and wearing shoes out and have to remake clothes and grow crops and pick them and spin the thread and weave the cloth and make the clothing. And, they knew that. So they didn't have experience with how fast do shoes wear out, how fast does clothing wear out, how fast does wineskins go bad, how fast does wine go bad, how fast does bread go bad. Because for 40 years, they haven't been making bread. They haven't been making wine and wineskins and clothes and just what they take out of Egypt has lasted for 40 years. So, they have this amazing, history for 40 years, a generation, and they know that. So, they're not put off by this doesn't add up. The bread would go moldy, get hard and moldy in that climate in a week. In a week, their clothes wouldn't wear out, their shoes wouldn't wear out, their wineskins wouldn't get old, their wine wouldn't be old. So they don't make the connection that this isn't a good timing sense, that they're being lied to. And they failed to do the one thing they could have done to see this through this exception. They were supposed to, when they made a treaty, run it by the Lord and get his advice. And the Lord would have said, hey, these people are deceiving you. And, don't make a treaty with them. Or the Lord would have told them, they're deceiving you. Here's the treaty you need to make with them instead of the one they're asking you to make. But the Lord was leaving them to their own devices so they would learn that they have to consult the Lord. That's where the chapter's going to go. And they did learn that lesson, and they never had to make a treaty with anybody else. Nobody else tried to deceive them. Nobody else tried to make a treaty. But if somebody had, they would have learned that lesson. Um, but you know, that's what they were supposed to have done, is consult the Lord before they made the treaty. They failed to do that. And the Gibeonites deceived them. They bought the story, they made the treaty. Um, and they all swore, and the leaders were the ones that swore. Um, because it was the leaders, and this is a clannish society, so the clan leaders, the patriarchs, when they swore it, everybody under them, in effect, had then also sworn to protect the Gibeonites. Um, verse 16. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the Israelites set out on the third day, came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them, because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath before the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that the wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community." So the leaders' promise them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way away from you, when actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never cease to serve as woodcutters or water carriers for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all of its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do whatever seems good and right to you." So, they tell the truth now that they know they're going to be alive, but they know they're going to be made slaves. Now, the thing is, the leaders said they were going to be slaves for the community. Joshua changed that slightly. Apparently, he'd been consulting with the Lord, and he made them slaves to the tabernacle, slaves to the worship of God. And this becomes significant because when Solomon builds the temple and the tabernacle is then decommissioned, they become the water haulers and woodcutters and slaves to the temple. And this becomes the temple servants. Because they're serving the temple and they're connected to temple worship. And before that, the tabernacle worship. They become Yahweh worshipers. They convert to Judaism. They follow the law of Moses. And they know their place. And they know that they are important to this sacrificial system. And they see the priests doing their job, and they learn the law of the Lord. And they are taken into captivity by the Babylonians as Israelites. And when Ezra comes back with a group of returning exiles, and Nehemiah comes back with a group of returning exiles, they both take a census of the people in the land. And temple servants is one of those classes. And it's 392 people who come back. Now, it's about 42,000 people that came back from Babylonian captivity into Israel at the end of the captivity to regrow the nation. But 392 of those 42,000 people were temple servants, the descendants of the Gibeonites. So the reason God let the Gibeonites get away with it is he knew the tabernacle and the temple would need servants to do the menial work that it took. Let's face it, um, sacrificing animals is hard labor, actually. Slaughtering them by hand and cutting up the meat. That was the priest's job. Repairing the clothes and making all the clothing and repairing the tabernacle or then the temple once it gets built, the physical structure of the worship center, that was the Levites' job. And um, then you got to burn the sacrifice. Well, that takes wood, and it takes a lot of wood to burn flesh. If you've ever overcooked something, you think, "Oh, I burn it; it's so little wood." If you want to burn it away so it's ash, that little campfire you overcook it on, so you can't eat it, it's not going to make it go away. I've tried that as a Boy Scout. Overcook it and forget this. Drop it in the fire. Just let it burn. You know what? The fire went out and I had charred on the outside meat that still had, I can't call it edible meat, but visible meat on the inside. It's too smoky from the burned meat around the outside to taste good. But the raccoon that found where I threw it out in the woods after trying to sample it, thought it was tasty. He ate the whole thing. He left the burnt crust in the woods and ate the innards. It was apparently nutritious, but it takes a lot more wood to burn it up to ash, and to burn it to ash within basically the working day takes more than that. It takes a pretty good fire. You're not going to do that on just a little bitty fire. So it takes a lot of wood. And you're not going to get that wood right next to the temple. You're not going to be able to grow a forest and cut it down and haul it to you're going to have to haul from a long way away. And history shows they went several hundred miles to go cut the wood and haul it back to the temple. Day after day after day for hundreds of years. These people did some serious labor. Likewise, the water. Once Jerusalem gets built up, there's aqueducts and there's wells in the city and there's cisterns that catch rainwater, and they could haul it from there. And hauling water was still heavy work. Let's face it, water's heavy. And if you're going to fill that sea, as they call it, or that bath, the smaller vessels that were in the temple, or even the ones in the tabernacle, it's over 10,000 gallons a day they're using. That's not trivial to go refill it all every day and keep that water, clean water there for the priests to wash their hands in, wash their bodies, and wash off all the ick. And the Levites had to wash up too, because they helped. And, they had to wash clothing that got blood on it. And that's by hand. Let's face it, that's not easy. And the Gibeonites did hard labor. It was not trivial what they ended up doing. But they gladly bent to serving God in exchange for their lives. And consequently got a place of honor within Israel for being dedicated to God better than the average Israelite. And, cutting wood by hand. This was before the days of saws. It's before the days of iron. When King David was king, they had 2 iron weapons in the whole army of Israel. Everything else was brass or bronze. Very likely, they're cutting trees with stone tools. That was probably the more durable tools they could do. Making those stone tools is labor intensive. So they had to make their tools, cut the wood, haul it, um, cure it, give it to the priest. I mean, of course, hauling it several hundred miles, they probably pretty much cured by the time they got it there. But they couldn't just go cut the forest and then ignore it. They had to, tend the forest, or in a generation, the forest wouldn't have been there. So they were planting trees, or they were cutting trees in such a way they spreaded back from the roots, and they got more firewood in a few years later. We're not sure exactly what, we have no record of it, but there's many forest practices they could have practiced to get firewood. Um, Consequently, also, they could make money on the side by selling firewood to the general public. Um, and apparently, they became the people who supplied firewood to the Israelites. Um, Before the Jerusalem got built up where it had cisterns and stuff, they would have had to haul water from the Jordan, um, basically every day. Haul 10,000 gallons from the Jordan River back up from the closest place would be the fords at Jericho. Um, but the fords are not great places to dip water out of a river. They probably traveled about 3 miles up from the fords and dipped it out of the river upstream. That would have been a better place. Um, but let's face it, 10,000 gallons a day traveling um, basically 3 days journey uphill. Um, that's labor. So the Gibeonites became the people who supplied the wood and the water for the temple, for the tabernacle. Uh, the tabernacle ended up for many years at Shiloh. Um, that's about a 5-day journey from the Jordan. Um, the way they could have carried water, um, basically the only practical way to carry water that they had was pottery vessels or stone vessels. Stone vessels would have been more durable but heavier. Pottery vessels are heavy to begin with. Um, the technology they had at the time, you could probably carry a pound of water in a pound of clay if you did it efficiently. Um, and then you have to have a bracket around the vessel to make it carryable and backpack it out. So, you know, they were probably carrying, 40 or 50 pound clay vessels that had 40 or 50 pounds of water in them. So, call it 105, 110 pounds coming from the Jordan up the hill um, to Shiloh, 5-day trip. Well, at 16 pounds a gallon, you're talking, 8 tons a day that was hauled from the Jordan. In probably equipment that weighed 8 tons. And then, a 5-day trip. So you're hauling that for 5 days. You dump it in, and then you have an empty vessel that now weighs 4 tons that you got to walk back to the Jordan for 5 days. This was an organized group. They would have had to have cooks and food with them and cooking utensils and stuff. And not everybody could have hauled water. Somebody had to, prepare for the group and haul the tents. And, you know, this is a massive undertaking that the Gibeonites are doing. And in the process, they get to know the Levites. They get to know the priest. They get to know the law of the Lord. They get to hear all the worship that goes on in the temple. They get to hear the priests teach the people. And they accept Yahweh and believe in Him, and they give up their pagan ways, and they give up their. And it's enough that God accepts them, even though they're a separate community that did not interbreed with the Jews. Genetically, they were still distinct. But He let them be taken into captivity. He let them come back from captivity, and they still had their place of being servants for the temple, for the people to worship. And they went back to doing their jobs of hauling water and getting wood at the rebuilt temple. And so their community was spared, not just from the captivity of the land to the Israelites, but the captivity of the land from the Babylonians. And among the Jews today, there are family lines that have last names that indicate they were Gibeonites. They were temple servants. And in Israel, there are groups that claim they are the descendants of the temple servants, still alive today. And when the temple gets rebuilt in Israel, they plan to be the people who are hauling water and hauling wood for the sacrifices in the new temple. It still continues today. God knew that. And let's face it, they're dedicated to Judaism. Now, today, apparently, they've intermarried with the Jews, and it's just families within the Jews, and they're fully accepted as Jewish. But you know, um, this is a phenomenon. Uh, the, the temple took a lot of labor to make it work. Um, so these are the people that are going to provide that hard work. And they gladly take it on. And they therefore become converted to worshiping Yahweh. God knew that He was saving these people from destruction. He also knew that He needed laborers. The Israelites would probably have resented it if they had to demoted to being doing that. But the Gibeonites, they didn't resent it because they realized their options were death or labor. And let's face it, this is work that to them was honorable work. Yeah, it's hard work, but if you're agriculturalist that has to grow a garden, has to grow your own food, and build your own city and keep it repaired and all that, they're going to have to haul water and haul cooking wood and all that anyway. It's part of the labor they were used to doing. Okay, they're still going to have to probably own their own farms and own their own homes and make their own pottery to carry the water in, and they're going to have to do all that work that they'd have to do to support themselves too. But they now have a purpose other than just survival, and they get survival as a bonus. So, from their perspective, they were happy to do this, and even till today, it's an honor for them to be the people who are going to do that work when the third temple is built. And they look forward to that day when they have a purpose again among the Jews. Isn't that amazing? It's history in the making. And, we read over it and go, oh, yeah, the Israelites got deceived because they didn't obey God. Yeah, but God had a bigger purpose. Yeah, he needed to teach them, consult me, so you don't make mistakes. But he also knew the Gibeonites had the honor to not be a thorny problem to the Israelites. In fact, the Gibeonites did not teach um, the Israelites pagan ways. They learned ways of Yahweh. So they got converted. Um, they didn't try to subvert the priesthood and go, well, you need to be worshiping Baal too, or Ashereth, or some of the other gods, whatever the gods had been before. They gave up their gods. They determined that God, Yahweh, was stronger than the puny little things that they had. And they gave them up. They quit, which is the real purpose. God wanted the Israelites to teach the world to worship him. That had been one of the things he told them, that they were going to be uh, priests to the world. And they kept worshiping Yahweh for themselves. And the Gibeonites, on the other hand, because they made this treaty, they got converted and they became worshippers of Yahweh. The only people that the Jews converted until after they came back from Babylon. And after they confronted the world was an evil place, filled full of evil people who worshipped weird ways and worshipped pagan gods and false gods. And then they began the task of, well, let's convert the world. And they weren't real good at it at the time. Jesus condemns them for their way that they go about it and for setting up burdens that can't be borne. Of course, he also knew that the Jews couldn't even bear the burdens of Judaism. That's why he came, to forgive everybody of their sins. Verse 26. So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the community and for the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose, and that is what they are to this day. So the Gibeonites became water carriers and woodcutters and for the community and for the worship of Yahweh. Very important task. And it saves them not just physically, but spiritually, because they put their faith in Yahweh. And they know he's a God of salvation. To the Gibeonites, the salvation was not from Egypt and the Exodus. It was not 40 years in the wilderness. It was not entering the promised land. It was, we didn't get slaughtered by an army that absolutely slaughtered all our neighbors. We got to live. And we got to serve this God by doing tasks we knew how to do. So, the Gibeonites become special people by being willing to be serving, to being willing to be servants of God and serve God and his people. And they've been preserved to this day because of that. And the idea is they still put their faith in Yahweh. I'm sure in Jesus' day, a lot of the descendants of the Gibeonites, the temple servants, became Christians. I'm remembering in Acts, there's a passage that talked about how many of the priests and Levites and temple servants came to the Lord. So, even then, some were believing in Jesus, became Christians. Even today, though, there's temple servants among the Israelites, among the Israelis, among the Jews worldwide, by last name, the implication is, that are expecting that when the temple gets rebuilt, they'll go back to serving the Lord, doing this. It's a precious story because of that. The Gibeonites, they saved their neck, just like Rahab. They saved their neck, but they become a special people among the community doing an important task. And that does free up the Israelites to go do other things. But even when the Israelites fell away and quit worshiping Yahweh, the Gibeonites continued to at least obey the priest. The priesthood became corrupt and quit worshiping Yahweh too. That became the downfall of the Gibeonites. But even there, Jeremiah said it's the remnant that's going to be saved is only going to be among the those who stay righteous. And temple servants were taken into captivity. So they were righteous to Yahweh. They obeyed Yahweh. So there was a remnant of them taken. And 392 came back to Israel to continue to worship Yahweh and serve Him by bringing wood and water for the temple and become temple servants again. And that rebuilt a community of temple servants that continued to serve the temple, and even through the Roman era. And they apparently escaped Jerusalem because it wasn't their fight with the Romans when the Romans razed Jerusalem in 70 AD. And they survived at that conquest because they worshiped Yahweh. Because their leaders realized early on that Yahweh was going to win. And they did whatever it took to survive. Precious Lord, we do thank you for being a Savior who cares about His people, who redeems His people, who brings them back out of captivity, who brings people to you, that you have always sought people to worship you and have faith in you, and that you knew the Gibeonites would be faithful, as faithful or more than the Israelites, who were true descendants of Abraham, and that it's not who the genetics come from that's important, but it's the faith. It's the faith of Abraham that's important, not the genetics. So they become the first example of people who are converted and believe in you, so that they're an example for us, even to today. And they still look forward to serving you. Lord, bless that faith, that service. Bless that legacy. Have us to realize that it's service to you that's important. Not whether it's menial labor or not whether we get a profit out of it, not what's in it for us, but do we serve you? Have us to be humble like they became. Have us to worship you in spirit and truth. Have us to be people who honor you with everything we do. That whether we go to work, whether we stay at home with family, whether we are interacting with neighbors, we'll be serving you and doing what you need for your kingdom. In your gracious name, amen. And I hope to see you Wednesday. I will be there Wednesday night to discuss this with you. And if not, I'll see you next week here on YouTube.